Hello, my name is Dennis Daly, and I am an interviewer with the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County. And today I'm going to be interviewing Mr. Elmer Golden. Today is September 19th, 2006, and we are at the main library. Mr. Golden, thank you for doing this.
You're welcome.
And we were talking a little bit off camera about some of the stuff you did after your service, but I'd like to start off today with maybe talking about how you got into service during the war. What were you doing a little bit beforehand, and were you drafted, or did you?
Well, I was 17 when I graduated from high school, and my birthday is in November, so I had that summer off, and November the 12th I was classified as 1A, which I knew I wanted anyway. A farmer offered me a job milking cows, and he said, "I'll guarantee you'll never be drafted." And I said, "I don't want that." I said, "I want to go." And so after I was 18, well, I thought, it was so close to Christmas, I thought, oh, they wouldn't take me till after Christmas. But that didn't make any difference until the war was on.
Right.
And December the 14th, I was on a train headed for Great Lakes.
So when you got drafted, did you get to choose the branch of service you were going to go
Yes,
into?
oh, here's another story about that. I went down, me and a friend who graduated high school together, went down there, and we asked to get in the Navy. We went down a week early. And he says, "Don't worry about it." Says, "The Navy is short of people right now," says, "You can get in." So we went back home, came back when we were originally supposed to, and went into the Navy. Both of us did. Otherwise, I was going to the Army. I wanted to go to the Army because I wanted to ride a motorcycle messenger, that type of thing, you know. But I listened to him and decided to try the Navy.
So it was a recruiter that actually taught you?
No, the friend of mine, when I graduated.
Okay. So then you went to Great Lakes,
Yes.
which everybody, I think, in the Navy actually goes through Great Lakes.
Not everybody, but most people.
Okay.
They have others in, I think, in San Diego.
Okay. And how long were you in Great Lakes?
The Great Lakes, the boot camp is supposed to be about 2 months long, but the wartime, we were through in 28 days. I remember that. Because, they rushed us through. And then after that, they asked us, or they assigned us where we were going to go. They didn't tell anybody. We put us on a train, and I had great hopes of going all the way to the West Coast, seeing the West. I'd never been out the West before. About a half hour later, when we left Great Lakes, they said, "Well, we're here." And it was Northwestern University.
Okay.
And that's where we went to radio school.
Okay.
And there was 250 of us assigned to radio school. So we were there for 16 weeks. That was a standard Navy training type for any job. And at the end of 16 weeks, we were given a leave, went home for about a week, and came back. And that's when we did go to the West Coast then.
Okay. Now, to get into radio school, was it something that the Navy assigned you through a test, or did you volunteer to go to radio school?
Partly that, because I had taken typing in school.
Mm-hmm.
They figured that was one less thing they'd have to teach me. So that probably had something to do with it, me getting assigned radio school.
Okay.
My friend of mine, he didn't, and he just went right to the West Coast and onto a ship.
Okay.
He didn't go to any kind of school.
Was he assigned, when he got to the ship then, he got assigned duties?
Yeah, deck force is what everybody goes on. And ordinarily, in peacetime, the Navy wants everybody to be on the deck force for a while to learn all the basic Navy jobs. You know, small boat handling and all that kind of working on the deck, and taking lines off from the ships tied up and stuff like that. But we avoided that too because they were too big. They needed radio man too.
Okay. So you said 16 weeks at Northwestern Radio School.
Yes.
Any experiences there of interest in radio school? What went into learning? What did you learn when you were in radio school?
To copy the code was the main thing we learned. And we also they had a class in theory of how radio waves bounce up and come back down. You have places where you have bad reception and it comes down real good, and then it'll skip like that, you know. And we had practical experience with actually working on stuff, soldering things and all that kind of stuff. And cleaning radio equipment with carbon tetrachloride, which has a terrible smell. Have you ever smelled it?
No, I
It's like a chlorine smell, something like that. That's what the Navy uses to clean all the contact points.
Okay. Now you mentioned copying the code. So you were taught then the code of
Yes.
what the U.S. Navy was. What kind of was it? Was that like a top secret room that you went in when you learned the code, or did you have to take any kind of oath or anything?
Oh no, it was a whole class of it. We had earphones on,
Okay.
and the code would come from the instructor would sound it out. But later on, after we got about halfway through, we started copying an actual Navy radio station, NSS from Washington D.C.
Okay.
And that's the rest of the time. That's what we copied.
Okay. So you were actually copying messages that were coming from.
Yeah,
this?
but they're all encoded though.
Right.
Well, all we could give was 5-letter groups.
Okay.
That's the way they sent it.
So you never got the whole message at one time. They would. Send
No, it was a whole message, but it was in 5-letter groups. Like part of a word might be in one group, and then part of it in another. Makes it harder for enemies to decode it.
Sure. And then would you decode it when you were there, or you just send it on?
No, we never. Not even when I was in the Navy on a ship. That was this officer, the officer in charge of the radio man. They called him communications officer. He had a separate little room in the radio shack. It was all his. None of us ever even got to go in there.
Okay.
And that he had a machine in there. He could decode the message.
So you were just passing the
Yeah, we just copied them down.
Okay.
And he took it in there and decoded it and gave it to the captain, or he would put it in English, you know, I forget what they call that, plain language, that's what it was, so that the captain could read it and the other officers that were supposed to see it.
So after radio school, you said you had leave, and then you went to the West Coast. Did you go to San Diego after that?
No, we went to Seattle,
Okay.
and that was where we saw a big building, had USS Laurens. That was a ship where we were, about 6 of us were assigned to that. And different ones would go to different ships, but that was one I was assigned to. And we stayed there for a few days, then went aboard the ship, and then took it out on a shakedown cruise and things like that. And they had a lot of, the way the Navy does it, they have about 80% experienced sailors, and about 20% of us new guys.
Okay. So you just basically went around Seattle to get to know?
Yeah, out into the ocean
Right.
and come back. We went all up and down the West Coast. We went to San Francisco, San Diego,
Okay.
Long Beach, everywhere. And then we ended up back in San Francisco. That's when we took our first real, actual trip into the war zone.
Okay.
We went from, they didn't even tell us, the Navy never tells you where you're going. The officers know, but we went from San Francisco to Lae, New Guinea. We sailed all that distance, and we knew we were going in a westerly direction, but nobody knew exactly where. This happened to be on my birthday, November the 12th.
Oh, yeah?
My 19th birthday, we pulled into Lae, New Guinea. And it was not totally Japanese controlled or American controlled. There were still Japanese army on a part of the island, and an American army on part of it.
Now I was going to ask, how long did the trip take from San Francisco to New Guinea?
I can't remember exactly. I think it was 20-some days.
Okay. So you were at sea the whole time there?
Yeah, I never saw a thing till we got to New Guinea.
And this is something that's come up in other interviews. Did a lot of, or you yourself experience seasickness?
Did I ever? Oh, me and an officer were standing right side by side, and both of us over the side.
Now, did it hit you right away, or was it after a few days?
It happens when the water gets rough.
Okay.
And it's partly psychological. You can see, like if you're out inside looking through a porthole, part of the time you can see the ocean, and then you see nothing but the sky. It goes up real far, and then it comes way back down. You see the ocean real close to you, and that helps get you seasick.
Mm-hmm.
And then also the pitching up and down. When you go up a ladder, one step will be real easy, and the next step you have to struggle to make it because of the up and down motion, you know.
So you got to New Guinea. Now, was there actually combat going on the island when you got?
Well, there might have been somewhere, but in the area where we pulled in, we just brought mail into the American army that was there. We had thousands of sacks of mail that we carried to the beach and left them.
Just dropped them at the beach, or was there actually?
We took them up on the beach.
Okay. And so how long you docked there for?
We stayed there about 3 days,
Okay.
but I can't remember where we went to next, but we stayed in the South Pacific area somewhere.
And at that point, were you still just basically delivering mail and stuff to different islands, or did you eventually get into some combat?
Well, what we would transport anybody. One time we had a whole load of nothing but Navy pilots. We took them from one island to another. Then most of the time, though, we had either Army or Marines that were ready for combat, and we would take them. And the first actual invasion we made was the one I mentioned a while ago in Luzon in the Philippines.
Okay.
And I didn't know how important that was at the time. I didn't know it until I was watching television this past summer. And I found out, you've heard of the Bataan Death March, and they were, the soldiers that survived that were in a prison camp, and they had a radio the Japanese didn't know they had. They had it under a blanket on their bed, and they were listening to it all the time. And all the time, so they got captured right after Pearl Harbor's bombed. And so they were there all through the war, eating nothing but bugs and a handful of rice a day that the Japanese would give them. So you can imagine what they went through.
Sure.
And when they heard about the invasion starting, boy, that really raised their morale.
Sure.
They knew the end was at least coming, you know.
Yeah.
And they were rescued right after that. The Army Special Forces went in, and while they were rescuing them, the Americans, I guess it's Army Air Force at that time, they sent a bomber over their camp where they were held prisoner, and it flew real low, and they knew all the Japanese were going to be really keeping their eye on it. And that's when they got them out of the camp.
Okay.
And the Japanese were looking at that bomber, wondering what it was going to do, you know. They had time just perfectly. When it came over, they would rescue them. They got them out of there.
So you basically were transporting. You transported. Did you transport Army or Marines?
Both.
Both.
At different times, sometimes we'd have all Army, sometimes all Marines. Never a mixture, though.
So did you get to see a lot of the action that was going on the beaches? Or?
Yeah, they were still dive bombing and everything.
Okay.
We went to Luzon.
And you would ferry them to the. They would take the transports off of your ships and
Yeah. See, our ship was called an attack transport.
Okay.
Do you know what an LCBP is?
No.
It's a little boat. It's about far from here to that wall long. And it's just like a shoebox, but it's got a ramp at the bow of it will drop down. So they carry about 20-some soldiers or Marines in that. And then they'd go up to the beach and drop that ramp, and they'd all scramble off and go ashore. Then the coxswain of the boat would race it back up and return to the ship and get another load.
Now, did your ship have any weaponry on it?
Oh yeah, we had 20 millimeter and 40 millimeter for anti-aircraft, and we had one 5-inch gun on the fantail.
Did you ever have to operate any of the artillery there on the ship?
I never did get assigned to a gun.
Okay.
I was always, because I was a radio man, I was assigned to a locker where all the deck force was, and we would have drills because they knew that Japanese suicide planes were coming in all the time, and we would go through a drill as if a suicide plane had hit that area. They would get out all the fire hoses and all that kind of stuff. So I never did get to actually shoot a gun.
Okay. So after, now how long were you involved with the invasion of the Philippines? Do you remember how long that took? Or?
We were on there about 2 days.
Okay. And did you just pull back while the fighting was still going on?
Yeah.
Okay, so the Philippines hadn't been taken when you pulled
No,
back?
not completely. There's a really interesting story about that. When the Japanese army, when they went in, they captured what they thought was all the American army, but it was on the side of a mountain, and there was a little, a mesa about a quarter of the way up the mountain, and there were soldiers way up in the mountain, farther up than that yet. Not too many of them, maybe about a dozen, and they didn't know anything about them. So they had the main American army captured and put in their cells or wherever they camped where they were holding them. And that night, these 12 soldiers were up in the mountains. They had guns up there all around that were zeroed in on this little mesa. That's what they used for target practice. And they were up there watching the Japanese. And the Japanese were all unrolling their sleeping bags, and thousands of them sleeping on that area. And that was right before it got dark. They waited till 10 o'clock that night, the sergeant in charge of them. He says, don't start firing until I start firing. And exactly 10 o'clock, he started firing. They didn't have to aim their gun because they were already zeroed in on that spot. And they killed over 600 Japanese soldiers just in a matter of a few minutes. And they got away. They started marching. As soon as they done that, they knew the Japanese would be coming after them. They marched as far as they could that night, and they found a cave to sleep in. And they could hear Japanese planes flying over real low and slow looking for them. But they never left any track on the ground. And that's why they kept doing that. They'd sleep all day and march all night.
Okay.
And they got away without ever being captured.
That was in the original in 42?
Yeah, that had been about in 42.
Okay. So then you pulled out from the Philippines. So what happened then? Did you go to another port to wait for another assignment, or?
I actually can't remember where we went to after that, because we went to some 8 places. And we did end up going to New Caledonia, and that's real far south of the equator, but I don't remember, we never done anything there. It was under, if it had ever been captured, I don't know if it had been captured or not by the Japanese, it probably had been, but it was under our control when we went there. We just went there and had a good liberty. With all the French speakers and everything.
Yeah.
New Caledonia was the big city there, the only big city.
You mentioned the equator. Isn't there something that happens when you cross the equator the first time?
Yes, they initiate you.
Okay.
And we got initiated because we had never been down there before. They do everything to you. Hit you with shillelaghs and stick your face into a... They have one guy, he takes the place of Neptuno Rex. They usually get a real fat guy, if they can find one, and put grease all over his belly. And then they shove your face into that grease. They do everything to you. Then after you get through, then you can go back and initiate other people that haven't been through yet.
Now, did you cross the equator a couple of times during
Yeah.
the war there? Okay. So you got to initiate others on that?
Yeah. And some of them would get mad that after you done so much stuff to them, you know. Especially one soldier, he started getting really mad, and this other sailor says, we'll have none of that here, and made him quiet down, you know. And also, they let us have some fun. It was Army versus Navy with water hoses.
Okay.
We were all squirting each other, and it kept getting meaner and meaner as the day went along, and pretty soon the captain come up and says, this is the captain, and he's all whatever it was will cease, right, as of now, before it broke down to an actual battle, you know.
Right. Now, that's an interesting question. If you had, now the Marines were technically part of the Navy.
Yes.
But if you had Army troops, and I hadn't thought about this until you were talking about it, you were transporting, was the captain of the ship in overall command of the Army troops, or were they separately under the command of their commanding officer?
Well, the ship was under control of the Navy captain.
Okay.
Whatever he says goes.
Okay.
But he would tell, like an Army colonel, what he wanted done. The Army colonel would actually do it.
Okay.
And I can remember one time we thought Japanese planes were going to attack us out at sea, and all Army personnel had to go below decks. This one guy's happened to be talking to him right before it was occurring, and boy, he didn't want to go. He was afraid the ship was going to get sunk. But him down there,
Right.
low as he could be, and the sergeants would come up to him and made him go. They had machine guns, the Army did. They were for their own people, you know, make them do what they were supposed to do, yeah.
So they actually had to make people do stuff at gunpoint on the ship?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
So after that, you said that you were also involved in the invasion of Okinawa.
Yes, that was, I remember the date of it because it was April Fool's Day, April 1st, 1945. And we were in Guam, which is not too far away. And there was most ships I've ever saw in my whole life. As far as you could see in every direction was nothing but ships, thousands and thousands of them, every kind imaginable. Carriers, battleships, transports like we were on, and everything imaginable. And in the morning, we got underway. And they, like, as usual, they didn't tell us where we were going. Till that evening, we pulled into Okinawa. In our type of ship, we pulled in about 600 yards off the coast of Okinawa and stayed there. And all the battleships lined up in back of us. And as soon as it became actual night, well, they started firing, the battleships did, over the top of us into the beach. And you talk about noise, about a dozen battleships, and each one of them has 9 guns. They're 16 inches in diameter, each one of them. There's, you know, three to a turret, and so it makes 9 for each battleship.
Right.
And they kept that up all night long. And it's constant, really, really loud. And then as soon as the sun came up, all that stopped immediately. And then all the planes took off from the carriers, and the sky was just black with planes, solid. They started bombing them in the daytime. And they had, this is something I wish you could find out. At 8 o'clock that morning, the Navy had orders to shoot at anything that came over our ships. And about a minute after 8 o'clock, here comes this little plane from Okinawa. It's like a little Piper Cub, you know what they are? Mm-hmm. And it was flying just right toward our ships. And 2 destroyers got with the radar-controlled guns, and both of them, these treasure shells, you could see them as they were going, where they were going. And both of them just hit that plane and kept it hitting it all the way till they got to the ocean. There was nothing left.
Oh, really?
And I always wondered if that was an American plane that they didn't get back to the ship on time, because battleships a lot of times would have one small plane, and it would go up in the air and tell them if there were shots where they were going too far or not far enough, so that battleship would zero in on something. Mm-hmm. And I always just wondered if that was actually an American that got shot down.
That's an interesting question, and it's probably a possibility there was.
I'd say a good possibility.
That's interesting. So the carriers, all the bombers took off of the carriers, and they were out over Okinawa at 8 o'clock?
Yeah, they flew over us too. They went right to the beach, and that's where they were bombing the same place that the battleships had been.
But you could tell that they were American, because you had said that you had orders to shoot anything that came.
Yeah, after 8 o'clock in the morning.
So they were supposed to be back on the carriers at 8?
Yes.
Okay, so they started bombing really early.
Yes.
And then you moved in and you started to transport the troops?
Right. We would load those little LCVPs. It was my job. I was at the very top of the ship, out in the open, the highest part of the ship, and I had radio there, and I'd give them tell them when to start in. They would circle the ship, just ground circle until all of them got together, and then I give them a signal, and they'd all take off to the beach.
How many transports usually went into the beach at one time?
Oh, I'd say there were probably 20 transport ships just like us. We're all doing the same thing.
And the little LCVs, how many of those?
LCVPs.
Yeah.
We had about 20-some on each ship.
About 20-some on each ship, and they held about?
20-some soldiers.
Okay.
They called them LCVP because it stands for Landing Craft, Vehicle, or Personnel. So they could actually take a big army truck or even a tank.
Okay.
One would fit on that.
And I'm sure that happened a lot. I'm sure
yes.
The tanks that would go across came off the ships.
This one guy, General Eisenhower, I believe, gave him credit. He was a Louisiana guy, and he's the one that invented the LCVPs. And he made them down there too, out of poplar wood.
Yeah, in New Orleans. That's where the World War II Museum is now.
Mm-hmm. So. And this is General, I'm pretty sure it was Eisenhower, said that he'd done more to win the war than any of the generals.
Well, that was a pretty...
And that was really something unique, because nobody had ever done that before.
Sure.
They were invading a place by small boats like that. And they could go in any place, as long as the beach was halfway acceptable to them.
Now, something I was thinking about when you were talking about this, did you ever have any interaction with the soldiers as they were getting ready to load on the transports to go on shore? Did you ever talk to them or get any kind of impression of what they were going through or feeling before they got on?
No, I talked to them all the time, but I can't remember them saying anything. That's the one I was telling you about that didn't want to go below. He says, when I'm on land, I know what to do. But he said, here, I just don't know what to do. That's why he didn't want to go down below decks, But that was something like that was what they would talk about. And here's something interesting. We got along with the Army guys a lot better than we did with Marines, even though Marines were part of the Navy.
Right.
They were much harder to get along with.
Really?
And yeah, but there were always fights. In fact, one day in the cafeteria, a sailor and a Marine were getting hotter and hotter. And Navy had one guy, he's about 6'4", that he stayed while we were eating in the mess hall, and he saw how hot it was getting. He walked up, he says, "Knock it off right now." And he told the sailor, he says, "You go this way." He told the Marine, he said, "You go this way." Made them separate, go out of the mess hall different ways so they wouldn't even see each other. That's how he broke it up.
What kind of stuff did people fight over? Just
Oh, it mainly was because it was a different branch of service. You know, there's always competition.
okay.
Even if you're on Liberty in California, that goes on. And I was in a place one time in Greenville, South Carolina. It was an armory. They were having a dance, and there was a whole bunch of sailors and a whole bunch of soldiers there. And the fight was about to break out there. And they had I guess you call it a hillbilly band, and he kept talking to everybody, playing his fiddle, trying to get everybody. And he finally did get everybody to dance instead of fight. And me and another guy from the ship was there, and the submarine was talking to him. He said, "If it starts, says count me in." He was going to be on the Navy side, you know.
Okay.
In a case like that, they are on the Navy side.
Oh, they're okay as a Marine.
Yeah, but when you're nothing but sailors and Marines, then you're enemies.
That's interesting. So in Okinawa, you were there how many days?
Oh, we stayed there for quite a while. After that, the first night, we'd just go out and sail around in a circle any place we wanted to, just to stay underway and not be a sitting duck right there by the beach when there's no bombing going on or anything like that. And the Japanese could shell us from there, so we just go out and circle and come back in the morning.
Now, did you have any kind of idea of how the battle was going?
Yeah, we talked to the Army, and I remember in Okinawa, they made 26 miles in the first night.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's,
Oh, yeah, I'll tell you something else interesting that happened at Okinawa. There was a gun shooting at American planes, and the Army didn't even know where it was or anything, and somebody on one of the ships was looking through binoculars, and they saw this end of a gun barrel sticking out of the top of a hill. And they called the Army and told them, and we watched it, the soldier went up, he got close to where it was, and he took a hand grenade, he dropped it down in that hole, and then he turned around and rolled away from it, and face down, and it went off. And that was the last they fired. And so they never fired. That gun was put out of commission.
Sure. I know that I've talked to and seen a few interviews with people that were in Okinawa, and I know that there was a good deal of kamikaze action.
Oh, that's something I know a lot about.
Did your ship ever get hit by a kamikaze?
Our ship didn't, but we've been in convoy several times. That's the only time I ever saw a suicide plane was when we were in a convoy, because I guess they figured it was easier to find when they were a whole bunch of ships. And 3 different times the ship on our port side got hit. One time we were standing in the chow line, and we had a carrier in our convoy, and they kept 3 planes above the convoy just circling all the time looking for the suicide planes coming from Japan. But this one came, and he got in right in with them. I looked up, and there was 4 planes up there instead of 3, and I thought, they just put it up an additional plane. And he didn't stay up there about 5 seconds till he went right straight down like that. And then hit the ship on our port side, and a big ball of black smoke went up, and he killed a bunch of sailors right there. And then later on, another interesting thing that happened on our ship. We all knew to go to general quarters, but the officer that was in charge of the ship at that time, he was they called him 90-day wonders. He happened to be a world tennis champion, and he was made an officer. And he didn't sound general quarters, and the captain just went crazy over that. And he relieved him of all duty, didn't let him do another thing on ship. He just there, that's all. He just stayed. And the captain was furious. And he said the sailors, the ordinary sailors like us, he said they knew to go to general quarters, but you didn't. And I guess that officer thought, well, they'd already crashed. Of course, you sound general quarters now. But he didn't know that there might have been many more of them together.
So that was the defense, just to send everybody to
general quarters. That's what it is.
To go to your
they sound like a gong, just keeps ringing for a long time, and everybody in the ship can hear it. That's when you're supposed to, no matter what you're doing, you got to drop it and go to wherever you're supposed to be as fast as you can get there.
Okay. Now, was this sort of to disperse the sailors on the ship so there wouldn't be too many together at once if a plane hit, or?
Well, it was mainly for defense of the ship.
Okay. So general quarters meant that you went to your assigned.
Your back station,
Okay,
is what they
I
call
got
it.
you. And was that the only kamikaze that you saw?
Oh, no, several of them. And another one time, this ship had its, you know what a boom is on a ship? For like a crane. And it was sticking out over the side of the ship, and this suicide plane came in, and his wing hit that boom, and so he didn't even get to hit the ship. He went spinning just like a rock, and he had to skip on the ocean. I saw that, and the ship, or the plane finally broke up into its main pieces, and his body come floating up. And he was killed, of course, but the rest of the plane sank.
Did you ever see American ships taking the suicide planes down before they hit, or did most of the time the kamikazes hit their mark?
All of them, except that one.
Okay.
Rest of them hit.
Okay.
I never saw any of them. In fact, that was their job, those 3 planes. They probably really got chewed out for that, for not getting in before he did crash. But and another thing, they were afraid for us, a lot of times we wouldn't have ammunition in the guns because so many casualties were 20 millimeter that'd go up and they'd land on another ship. And they said a high percentage of our casualties were from our own fire. So a lot of times we couldn't even fire at a Japanese plane flying over for that.
Didn't have time to.
Well, you had time, but they were afraid that our own shells would hit other sailors.
So they basically were taking the chance on the kamikaze as opposed to missing the plane and hitting another ship. That's
Exactly.
interesting. I didn't know about that. And Okinawa was really the last major battle before the bomb was dropped.
Right. But before that, it was Iwo Jima.
Right.
Maybe a couple months before that. And they're not too far apart, Iwo Jima and Okinawa. But Okinawa was the very last one.
Do you remember where you were when you heard that the bomb had been dropped on Hiroshima?
No, but I remember another important thing. We were out at sea, and this one radio man from Texas, I remember, he was just copying press, the civilian press, and he copied where Roosevelt died. And that's how our whole ship found out about that.
How was the what was the reaction on the ship?
Everybody was really wondering. They'd never heard of Truman before. They thought, well, what's going to happen now? They didn't think he could do it, because nobody thought that anybody could replace Roosevelt.
Right.
He could have been reelected as many times as the rest of his life, which he did.
And he was probably president from when you were just a
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can remember when I was really small, that people were talking about the prohibition was going to end if Roosevelt got elected. And because there's no beer for a long time while Hoover was in. And after Roosevelt won, well, it wasn't long until all the bars opened up again. I was about 5 years old, I think. And I remember hearing all the men talk about it whenever they would get together.
And then Roosevelt passed, and then they dropped the bomb. So you don't remember hearing about the first bomb, or?
I don't remember where I was when I heard about it.
Okay.
But I do remember when the war was over, we happened to be in California.
Okay, you were all the way back to the States by the time, Jeff.
We'd returned, I think, as long as we stayed over without returning was 8 months.
Okay.
And we happened to be in California. We were on Liberty. Me and about half a dozen guys were in Santa Rosa, California. And about 6 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that. And all of a sudden, everybody started blowing horns, turning on their lights. And after a while, we figured that must be it. And some civilian told us, they listened to the radio, said, the war is over. And boy, we were saying, that was the greatest time there ever was.
Yeah. Good night then.
And me and this friend of mine from Indiana, we ran together all the time. We got to a bus station. We went to Reno.
Okay.
We had 4 days off, 4 days of liberty while we were in California. We went to Reno to celebrate the war being over. And boy, that was a wild place.
Yeah.
And we were trying to get friendly with some stripper.
I'm sure it was very, very exciting. The war was going on.
Oh,
and you mentioned people turned their lights on, so were there still blackout conditions?
Oh, and they just done that to let everybody know. They just felt good, I guess.
Right, okay, I didn't know if they were still.
Yeah, they were blowing
blackout
horns
conditions.
and turning on lights and everything like that. We knew it had to be that reason. And some civilian told us, and we knew for sure.
And that was really the end of the war because the Germans had surrendered in May,
Right.
so this was August of 45.
And that made a big difference just in our ship, because while the war was on, you couldn't show any lights whatsoever. And if you wanted to go outside, you'd have a curtain to pull aside, close it, then open another curtain and go out and close it again. And after the war was over, you have lights on outside, you sit out there and enjoy it. It would be like being on a cruise then.
Right, yeah.
Altogether different. I remember one time we had a load of Marines on during the war, and this Marine, he forgot about it and lit a cigarette out in the open. And boy, the captain got up, loudspeaker right away. He says, "Well, the Marine just lit that cigarette, report to the bridge on the double." And naturally he didn't. He put it out real quick and got lost in the crowd.
Well, you could see a cigarette 3 or 4 miles on the
Yeah,
ocean.
and that's a light of a match too, even farther. And that's what he done. He just,
Okay.
Marines are supposed to know better.
Sure,
But they just can't help, they forget once in a while.
So when you were on a ship, that's kind of an interesting question. Did people have to smoke inside? Was it?
Yeah, they smoked it all. They smoked inside.
Okay. So the war was over, you were on leave. Did you then have to go back to the Pacific and work in any kind of like peacetime around Japan, or?
Very interesting. We were put on the program called the Magic Carpet. We would sail out of Seattle, take troops over to occupy Japan, sail what they call the Great Circle. We just real close to the Aleutian Islands and come down in Tokyo. Then we let our new troops go, and then we pick up veterans that were coming back to the States for discharge. We go back the same way, come back into Seattle, 2,000 each direction.
Okay. What was the atmosphere like for the veterans that were coming home? Were they
Oh, boy,
celebrating? And-
Yeah, we had good food and everything like that. I mean, it was just like a holiday, picnic, you know.
So, how long did you do that for? How long until you got discharged?
Well, we done that for a long time, and then finally, they were going to decommission our ship. They took us out of that program. We sailed down the west coast of California and on down the west coast of Mexico to the Panama Canal. Went through the Panama Canal and came up to Norfolk, Virginia, and put our ship in mothballs temporarily, but later on they broke it up and sold it for scrap.
Oh, really?
So we were in Norfolk for a long time, and that is where that's a Navy town, you know. Everybody, that's all you see. You go into a bar, see nothing but white caps.
Especially in 45, 46.
Oh,
I'm sure.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So is that where you were discharged in Norfolk, or?
No, I had to come home, went back up to Great Lakes to be discharged.
Okay.
And they gave us $300, I think, which was really a lot of money then.
Sure.
And I had that money, and we stayed around Chicago for about a week, just having a good time. Then went home on a train. And that was the end of it until I got called back in again a few years later.
Sorry, we were talking about that. So after the war, then you were in the reserve still.
Yes.
In the Navy Reserve.
Mhm.
And did you work in between World War II and Korea?
Oh yeah, that's when I had the job at Autolite.
Okay.
I had a real good job. I'd been working there just about 3 years, making real good money. Here comes this great big envelope in the mail, U.S. Navy. I thought, knew what it was.
You knew what it was?
Yeah,
So they were calling you back?
yeah. Then that time, I went to, can't think where I reported to, but I can't remember whether it was Florida or New York. But anyway, that's wherever it was, that's where I went to Panama. And I stayed there for the whole year and came back, and I was discharged in New York that time.
So that was during the Korean War?
Yes.
And you said you were in Panama, stationed in Panama.
Yes.
And you were doing radio
Man
transmissions?
work.
Okay.
Yeah, transmitting instead of receiving.
Okay. Now, were you stationed on a ship there? Or
No,
were
it
you-
was a land base.
Okay.
It was about a whole bunch of sailors It was a small base though. I'd say about 50 sailors and about 20 Marines that were there for security purposes. They manned the guard shack and all that kind of stuff. And they were there they had their rifles and everything like that. Because they just want to be safe when they're in a country like Panama, in case they would try to come in and invade it or something. And we got along real good with the Marines there. It was a good bunch of guys.
Yeah. Now, the difference between when you were during World War II, you said you were receiving the messages, and you were transmitting them during the Korean War. Was there any kind of difference in terms of, did you see the original message and then you encoded them at that point?
No, I never got to see a single thing.
So you just got bits of code again. So
we done a lot of other things too. We would transmit between different Navy bases down there.
Okay.
And by voice. And we had a word that identified us. It was hawk. Then maybe another might be eagle. Mm-hmm. That way nobody could know who was what, that's the only way we would identify you. You say this is hawk, talking to eagle and stuff like that.
Okay.
And everybody had a different word for their. And that was true on the ship too during the war. We had a voice. We were called wood stick. Our ship was. And when you're in a convoy, you have to transmit by voice back and forth quite a bit. And I remember one ship wouldn't keep up with the convoy, and I had to tell him to speed up. He was jeopardizing safety and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know whether they were having engine trouble or what, but they finally did get back in.
They did get back in.
Well, I'll tell you another interesting thing if you want to go back to World War II.
Absolutely.
Okay, when we were in a convoy, we'd have to zigzag when you got into a place where Japanese submarines could be. And that way, that was my job up there, to give a signal when the officer would give the helmsman duty to change course. We had a whole bunch of plans, and we would have a plan where you'd go so many minutes in this direction at a certain speed, then you'd turn so many degrees to the port side maybe for about a minute or so, and then you'd turn back starboard again for maybe 2 minutes at different speeds each time. And what would happen once in a while, in the South Pacific, with no air conditioning on the ship, and it was really hot. And when it happened to get right exactly with the way the breeze was blowing. So when we were doing that, there was no breeze whatsoever. I mean, that's when it really got hot. And it did not last for 5 minutes that way.
Right.
And so everybody was really glad when they finally changed course and started getting breeze again.
So this went on, just out of curiosity, how long would you keep a zigzag course in general? Would it be a matter of days?
Oh yeah, until you got to where you were going.
So it would be every few minutes you'd be changing course?
Yeah. And every ship had to do it exactly alike or you would collide.
Oh, really?
Yeah, every ship would have to do it perfectly.
Did you ever have any problems with that?
No. Okay. No collisions or anything.
That's excellent. I know I interviewed a gentleman who was in this Pacific theater. He was in the Navy, and he talked about swimming off the ship. Did you guys ever do that? He had mentioned, I don't know if this is the same ship, but there was always someone there ready to shoot the sharks.
Yeah.
They also had somebody armed there ready for the sharks. So
that's when I got my first taste of what it'd be like to scuba dive, because I'm really good at holding my breath. I could go down real deep in some place in the South Pacific. I can't remember where it was. I saw more beautiful fish than I had ever saw before. And I never did go scuba diving or anything.
You never got to scuba dive?
But me and another guy was tied for the best in Panama. We had a swimming pool there, and we were always seeing who could stay underwater the longest. I mean, this might sound like a bull view, but one time I stayed under 3 minutes.
Wow.
And several times in 2 minutes and 45 seconds or something like that. I only stayed 3 minutes one time. And when I came back up, I was in just good shape from doing that. I went to swim in Mason, Ohio, in their public pool, and I just done what you done down there. I'd kicked off the side, face down, went out, coasted out to the middle of the pool, and just stopped with my arms out my side, and just stayed in that position for a long, long time. Pretty soon that lifeguard started blowing his whistle. I mean, he thought I died or something. And I knew it was for me, so since he started blowing his whistle, I just started swimming, swam over to the other side of the pool, and turned around and swam back. Never came up yet, back to the original side, that time I was really out of breath. I had to come up and, but he was giving me some really dirty looks.
Did he say anything to you? Or
No.
So you were in Panama for, you said, a year?
Yes.
During the Korean War. Now, how did they, is that how long a tour of duty was at that point, or did
Well,
you?
they just kept me and the other reserves till they didn't need us anymore.
Okay.
Then give us a discharge.
There was no set time on that? Or?
No.
And here's a question, we haven't really talked to many Korean War veterans, but I know in World War II there were points that you could earn to get
Yeah.
out. Was
Yeah.
that also the case during the Korean War, or?
I don't think so. At least in my case, it didn't apply. It was just because they just wanted to get reserves in while they needed them, and then discharge when they didn't. But during the war, it was points. We had so many points for being in the dangerous places and in the invasions and stuff like that. And then the total time you were in, your age, and everything counted.
Mm-hmm.
And we were eligible in World War II. We were in. As soon as they started out, we were eligible to get discharged. But they had, the way the law is set up, they can keep you 6 months.
Okay.
The duration, 6 months is what they call it. And they offered all of us, if we would sign up to go to the South Pole, the next highest rate, wherever he was, like I was 3rd class, they would make me 2nd class if I would go to the South Pole for 6 months.
Oh, yeah?
And I didn't do
You
it.
didn't do it?
I wanted to be a civilian again.
And then here's a question that comes to mind about when you were drafted. Were you drafted for the duration of the war? Is that basically what?
Yeah, duration was 6 months.
Okay. So the minimum time was 6 months.
Well, it's 6 months after the war.
Okay.
Because they couldn't get rid of everybody and leave their
Sure.
ships not manned or anything like
Right.
that. So it had to be 6 months.
So at least through the duration of the war and then 6 months after?
Yes.
Okay. And then when you got done with Panama, did they bring in regular Navy to replace you there, or were there more reservists that came in?
No, they had enough regular Navy there because they didn't need that as many people as they had had before.
Okay.
So they got rid of all us reservists.
You got to go back home.
And the regular Navy stayed there.
Were you then still in the reserves, or?
No.
After you got called back up, that.
I said, not again. I never re-upped in the reserves.
Okay.
Because I didn't know when another war would start.
Sure.
You'd never be good to be a civilian, that
That's
way.
right. That's right. So you decided enough was enough after that.
Yeah.
And you came back to the Cincinnati area
Mhm.
and worked in Sharonville, you said.
Yes.
Until, was it 61 that you joined the Merchant Marines?
About that, yeah.
Now, what prompted you to join the Merchant Marines?
Because when Autolite went out of business,
Okay.
I didn't have a job, and I wanted some more adventure anyway. I was going to go aboard like tankers owned by different companies, like SO and people like that. And somebody told me, says, you can get a job working for the Navy. And I said, wow, that sounds good.
Mhm.
So I'd go to the Coast Guard and get a DD-214. That shows your sea service that you had.
Okay.
Then I went to New York and showed it to them, and I was hired as a storekeeper there in the Merchant Marine. And they got rid of they used to have an officer that was in charge of the storekeepers, then the chief, then the actual storekeepers, and they got rid of everybody and just made the storekeeper do all the jobs. And I was like a chief.
Okay.
Just didn't have to sleep in a big compartment full of people. Just had me and one other guy in a room, And you don't stand chow line there. You go and sit down at the table. Waiter comes around, asks you what you want, brings it to you.
A little bit better than when you were in the Navy. Huh?
Oh, heck yeah.
So then but you went aboard ship and worked for the Merchant Marine.
Yeah, I was on a different type of ship too. Have you ever heard of the submarine Thresher?
No.
Something happened to it. It was a brand new submarine, and it went out on its first time to sea. They still had engineers from the company that made it aboard. They went out just to test it out, and it sank. It went right to the bottom of all the Newfoundland. It went right to the bottom of the ocean. And I was on a scientific ship that had the bottom of the hull would open up like that. It had on top of the ship, there was a big spool with metal cable on it. I mean, it was really long. They put a television set on this, and this cable and lowered it to the bottom of the ocean, and we would cruise around looking for the treasure.
Okay.
There's a whole bunch of us ships out there doing
Okay.
that. We finally found it, and
Was it the ship that you were on that found it, or was it another ship?
I don't remember now.
Okay.
The ship found it, and but they knew exact location. And it was too deep to do anything about it.
Oh, so they couldn't bring it back up?
No, I think it was 129 people aboard.
Did they all die?
Yeah, they all died.
What kind of stuff besides that? Were there all sorts of different jobs that you did when you were in the Merchant Marines?
No, it's a storekeeper only is what I know.
Okay.
That was when you just order supplies. When you come into port, you have a big sheet of paper filled out, what you need, so many safety goggles, so many this, so many that.
Okay. And the ship you were on, was it something that was hired out by different companies or?
No, it's still the Navy.
Okay, so the Navy was.
You remember that one guy, Robert McNamara,
Yes.
somebody before him had gave the ships to the Army. That's why the ship I was on was named the General Gordon.
Okay.
Then when McNamara took over, he gave him back to the Navy, let them run it, and let the Army do something else, you know, which sounds logical, and it is logical. And the Navy never changed the name, they just left the General
Okay.
on it, you know. And it was a big ship, it was 700 and some feet long. That's the one I went to Africa and India.
And you were there till 63, did you say?
Yeah.
Did you were never involved in anything that had to do with Vietnam at that point? That was,
Oh, no, that was
to the
when he started or nothing. Or I don't know what year Vietnam started, but we didn't have anything to do with it.
Okay. So
But later on, I know they would have. They call it MSTS, the Military Sea Transportation System.
Okay.
And I know they would have been taken, they'd had something to do with Vietnam.
But
In fact, the ship I came back when I got this, leaving Panama, was on one of those ships.
okay.
And we went from Panama to Trinidad to Puerto Rico, and then Puerto Rico to New York.
And in your travels, you said you traveled all over the world, and you were telling that story. It's kind of interesting. What was the story with the Indian soldiers that
Oh, they were just keeping order in Africa. Wherever, I don't even remember what country it was in Africa, but they had all their usual stuff with them, swords and rifles and all that kind of stuff. And they were just keeping peace, trying to keep the Mau-Maus from killing other civilians.
And so the U.S. Navy basically lent its services to the Indian Army to transport these soldiers back and forth. Okay.
And all the time we had Indians aboard the ship, there was no hamburgers served. Because to them, the cow is the same thing.
So that's interesting that everybody followed the.
Yeah, we didn't want to insult them or anything like that, you know.
That's good. Well, sir, is there anything else you'd like to add? Any other stories you'd like to talk about today, or?
That's all I can think of right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I suppose that's all.
Well, it was a pleasure. I'd like to thank you for
Okay.
doing the interview, and that's about it. Thank you very much.
You made it much easier by all the questions you asked and everything. It would have been hard for me to think of all that stuff.